Question here concerning Miami's ability to compete in the ACC for a championship. So I think this is a different situation in this conference than any conference in the country because of the presence of Clemson. So competing for a division championship, and even though anybody has a puncher's chance in one 60-minute football game, there's just a whole other level when you talk Clemson football and where they are right now. So before I turn it over to Cam, that's my take on Miami. We discussed this with Cam a couple weeks ago in regards to the talent on the roster at Miami versus the rest of the Coastal Division. Now, that roster talent has only converted to one division championship in these many years, but it's always been the best, and Virginia Tech's been close a number of times in regards to talent. But we've seen Duke win, Georgia Tech win multiple times, Pitt win last year, and North Carolina as well, and go to the ACC championship game with lesser talent. So that's not the end-all be-all. You got to turn it into something. But in regards to competing for a championship, so when I'm asked questions like this, Cam, I force the people to tighten up the question because, hey, this is for hardcore college football fans. We are for the smart fans. So we're going to hold you accountable. So when you say, can Miami turn it around? I'm like, what does turn around mean?
Right.
Fine, turn around. So this viewer here, I'm sorry I missed your name, but is asking about competing for the ACC championship.
I mean, it's a thing that Miami should aspire to, obviously. You know, you talk about goals. And I mean, there's steps along the path. The goal is a national championship. So the path along that way is win every game on your schedule, win the Coastal Division, which would happen by virtue of that, win the ACC Conference, which would happen by virtue of that, and then win the national championship. So there's progressional steps. Miami is the most talented team in the Coastal Division, and it is not even close. The blue chip ratio, I'm doing the math, or I'm writing that piece, I think, in a couple weeks after – in a couple weeks, right before spring practice. But yeah, Miami is going to be at 55, 58%, almost 60% blue chips. Bro, that's national championship caliber roster status. So, you know, winning the division should happen. Now,
not to cut you off, is it really that high?
Yeah. Yeah, it's over 50%.
Because that Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia line is like really...
It's 60, 70%. You're right. Yeah. But I mean, it's up there. Like I want to say, if I open up the calculator on my computer right now, if we're talking 44, if you talk 44 blue chips out of 83 roster or scholarship people, that's 53% blue chips right there. And I think that we're about that, give or take.
I'm going to take a guess that when you finish your compilation for the entire division, that the shocking fact is going to be that maybe North Carolina is number 2. North Carolina, despite these 2 seasons in which they've won 5 games the last 2 years and only 2 in the ACC against, 14 losses the last 2 years, they're always like 22nd, 25th. They have much better recruiting classes than Pitt at 45 and Virginia at 55. And I was going through, I've got right here recruiting rankings that I did a series here, and this series could go on endlessly, Cam, where I found a bunch of interesting storylines. Like, let's look at Miami, Florida State, and compare, like I mentioned to you, recruiting rankings versus results on the field. Let's take the Clemson team from last year that whipped Alabama, and let's look at their recruiting rankings and compare their 4 and 5 stars versus the teams that competed on the field in the national championship game. Urban Meyer against Michigan. Obviously, we know that was a runaway, but let's look at it. I was starting on Alabama since Saban arrived versus the rest of the SEC in regards to 4 and 5 stars. So I got the recruiting rankings right here. And when you look at North Carolina over the last 5 years, 20, 29, 32, 28, and 30. Now, who has been the second best team in the division talent-wise over this time? Probably Virginia Tech, I would guess, has maybe the best record in the division over the last 5 years. 24, 26, 42, 29, 28. And everybody else, like in the 4th, Virginia, as good as they became last year at 8 and 5, 59, 58, 63, 50, and they had a 33 class.
Yeah, so I mean, all those things are true. Miami should be able to compete for an ACC championship. Now, obviously, that is climbing a big mountain with Clemson on the other side, but the path there is really going to be up to Miami. And I've said it for years. If Miami does what they need to do in the Coastal Division, they should win it, period. Period. That's it. because there's no team that is as talented as Miami. I don't care. So we should be able to get there. And then obviously it's scheming up and figuring a way out, one game scenario to, dethrone Clemson. But obviously even bad Pitt teams have been able to figure that out. So there's a chance.
And before you get to the secondary again, I'm going to lock us down into the semantics real quick. When you ask a question like that, you bring up Pitt last year. Did Pitt compete for the ACC championship? Technically, yes, they did. They went 6-2, won the division,
Right.
and they played in the ACC championship game. Would most people consider Pitt to have contended for the ACC championship? No, they were absolutely no contest or challenge to Clemson. So
Right.
it's a very different situation in that conference unless something changes here. And the likely candidates would be Miami and Florida State to do something about it, to change it and to even the playing field once again. But this conference is different than the other four when it comes to that.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, all of that is true.